I'm Audrey, 28 years old, and I'll never forget that day. It's etched into my memory with the kind of sharp clarity that makes it feel like it happened yesterday. One moment, I was walking into a family gathering trying to keep my expectations low. The next, my body went numb from the waist down and I couldn't move. I was trapped, helpless, and completely at the mercy of a cruel twist of fate. Or more accurately, the cruelty of my own family. My brother Jason stood over me laughing. That laugh. It still echoes in my mind, mocking, triumphant, utterly devoid of empathy. He thought it was funny, this prank, that had gone terribly wrong as I lay motionless on the concrete. My dad's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and dismissive. "Walk it off, Audrey. Don't be a baby." And my mother? She didn't comfort me. She blamed me for ruining Jason's birthday party. Their words were worse than any physical pain I felt at that moment. A cruel confirmation that the people who were supposed to protect me were incapable of even basic compassion. They didn't know, or perhaps didn't care, that their dismissal of my pain would soon put them on the wrong side of the law. That a moment of neglect, compounded by years of toxic dynamics, could spiral into something irreversibly life-changing. If you've ever felt ignored, minimized, or outright dismissed by the very people who should care the most, I want you to know you're not alone. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Hit like, subscribe, and stick around because this is the story of how my family's betrayal altered the course of my life forever. Growing up in the Matthews household was like walking on eggshells. From the outside, we looked perfect. A pristine suburban home in Massachusetts, a father who was a successful accountant, a mother who seemed to embody the ideal homemaker role, and 2 children who excelled academically. To outsiders, we were the picture of family success. But appearances lie. Behind closed doors, our home was a minefield, each step a careful calculation to avoid triggering explosive criticism, manipulative tactics, or subtle cruelty. My dad, Douglas Matthews, was a towering figure, 6 feet 2 inches of stoicism and rigid authority. Emotions in his eyes were weakness. "Pain is just weakness leaving the body," he'd say, echoing lessons from his own military father. And he drilled that philosophy into us relentlessly, especially my older brother Jason, who thrived under the glow of favoritism. My father's mantra, "Toughen up, Audrey," was my constant companion growing up. Whether I scraped my knee, broke a bone, or was genuinely ill, the response was the same: minimize, dismiss, move on. There was no comfort, no empathy, only a relentless demand to endure. My mother, Eleanor, wasn't much better. On rare occasions, she showed glimpses of nurturing, a warmth that hinted at a different, better version of herself. But those moments were fleeting. Her loyalty lay firmly with my father and Jason. She existed in a constant state of nervous vigilance, terrified of upsetting the fragile balance of our household. If acknowledging my pain meant rocking that balance, she chose denial every single time. Her favorite line, meant to silence and invalidate me, was, "Jason wouldn't complain about something like that." Those words cut deeper than any scraped skin or broken bone. They told me my feelings didn't matter. Then there was Jason, 3 years my senior, now 31 at the time of that party. The golden child. The flawless son in our parents' eyes. Athletic, charming, manipulative. He quickly learned he could do whatever he wanted, get away with anything as long as he maintained the carefully curated illusion of perfection. I remember vividly the first time I saw him exploit that privilege. I was 7 and he was 10. He pushed me off my bike and I broke my wrist. I cried, hoping for protection or at least acknowledgement. Instead, he lied, claiming I had fallen because I was clumsy. My parents believed him without question. At the hospital, my father lectured me about being more careful while my mother fretted about medical bills. No one questioned Jason. No one cared about my truth. That pattern continued year after year, leaving me to navigate a life where my pain and my reality were constantly invalidated. As I grew older, Jason's pranks escalated from irritating to downright cruel. At 12, he locked me in the basement during a thunderstorm, knowing full well I was terrified of the dark. When I finally escaped and reported him, my parents accused me of seeking attention. At 16, he sabotaged my science project the night before it was due. I failed. My parents told me I should have been more prepared. The message was clear. I was responsible for the consequences of Jason's misbehavior. This pattern, this emotional manipulation and dismissal, was the framework of my childhood. By the time I reached adulthood, I had learned to keep my distance. At 18, I moved out for college in another state, visiting home only for major holidays and family events. I became an elementary school teacher, built a circle of friends who genuinely cared, and started therapy to confront the damage my upbringing had caused. But no matter how far I ran, the gravitational pull of family ties was strong. Guilt and obligation dragged me back despite my best efforts to maintain boundaries. That's why, when my mother called pleading for me to attend Jason's 31st birthday, I reluctantly agreed. It had been 6 months since my last visit. Maybe I hoped time had softened the edges. "It'll mean so much to Jason if you come," my mother said, though I doubted Jason cared at all. "We're having a backyard barbecue. Your father's setting up the new pool deck. Everyone's coming." By everyone, she meant Jason's obnoxious friends, the kind of people who made the very thought of the afternoon nauseating. But excuses had run out. "Fine. I'll come," I said, already dreading the encounter. "Wonderful. Dress nicely. You know how important appearances are to your father," she added. Her words stung as always. I had recently embraced a casual style, comfort over conformity. In the Matthews household, even a small act of self-expression was considered a rebellion. Hanging up, I steeled myself. I would attend, make small talk, hand over a generic card with cash, and leave as soon as socially acceptable. I had no way of knowing that this birthday party would mark a life-altering turning point. Jason's casual cruelty would escalate beyond anything I had experienced. My parents' habitual dismissal of my suffering would cross a line from emotional neglect into criminal negligence. I packed an overnight bag, choosing a hotel rather than my childhood bedroom, a small assertion of independence, a reminder that I was no longer under their control. I dressed with care, dark jeans, a blue blouse, and comfortable flats. Presentable to my father, comfortable for me. Driving the 2 hours to their house, I relied on my therapist's advice. Deep breathing, visualizations, reminding myself that I had the power to leave if things became unbearable. But no amount of preparation could have protected me from the disaster that awaited. No meditation, no rehearsal could prevent what was about to unfold, or heal the scars it would leave behind, both visible and invisible. I pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 2 p.m., timing it carefully to minimize unwanted interactions. My plan was simple: blend into the crowd, avoid direct family confrontation, and get through the afternoon with as little attention on me as possible. 2 hours later, I would return to my hotel and breathe a sigh of relief. That was the strategy, at least. Cars were packed tightly across the driveway, luxury SUVs, sports cars, and a few flashy motorcycles that belonged to Jason's friends. It was a small display of the kind of wealth and status that my family and their circle valued so highly. I spotted Tyler's red Corvette, and a twinge of unease ran through me. Tyler had been one of the first to join Jason in tormenting me when we were kids. Seeing the car was like opening a door to old wounds I thought I had managed to shut. Mom appeared at the door, greeting me with a quick air kiss. She cast a subtle glance at my outfit, barely passing her silent inspection. "Audrey, you're here. Everyone's out back." Jason just opened his gifts. Of course, they hadn't waited for me to arrive before starting the presents. That was their way of signaling that I didn't truly matter, that my presence was optional at best. It was a familiar sting, one that had been embedded into my consciousness over decades. The living room was littered with fancy gift wrap. There were new golf clubs, designer clothing neatly stacked on tables, and even car keys placed conspicuously as if to announce Jason's rising privileges. "Jason got the jet ski he wanted," Mom said proudly, pointing to a photo of the prize on a large box. "Your dad's having it delivered next week." I nodded politely, swallowing a mix of irritation and hurt. My own birthday a year prior had been marked by a department store gift card, a reminder of the unequal ways I had always been treated. The comparison, intentional or not, stung more than I wanted to admit. I placed my modest gift, a simple card with $200 tucked inside, on the table and followed Mom to the backyard. About 30 people lounged near the new pool deck, mostly men in their 30s, beer bottles in hand, laughing at jokes I didn't understand. My father was at the grill, turning burgers and steaks with the practiced ease of a man who took pride in his suburban authority. He was the embodiment of control and pride, a father who could perfectly balance appearances with the occasional scolding glance. Jason, as always, held court by the pool, commanding attention as if it were his birthright. His smile was wide, his gestures exaggerated, but the glint in his eyes never wavered. A cold, familiar mischief that reminded me why I had always kept my distance. When he noticed me, he broke from his group, pretending enthusiasm. "Little sis, you actually showed up," he shouted, pulling me into a hug that was far too tight, far too rough. It reminded me, as it always did, who held the power in our relationship. "Happy birthday, Jason," I murmured, carefully extracting myself. "Nice setup. Dad dropped a fortune on this deck," he said proudly, pointing to the pool's polished wooden frame. "Custom Brazilian hardwood. Almost $20,000. The statement wasn't just about money, it was a clear comparison. They would spare no expense for Jason, but my needs and celebrations were always secondary. I grabbed a water from a nearby table, deliberately avoiding alcohol. I needed to stay sharp. My father's smirk, my mother's faint nod, Jason's calculating look. They all reminded me that vigilance was necessary. For the next hour, I navigated the treacherous social landscape, making small talk with other guests, mostly the wives and girlfriends who seemed as uneasy as I felt. We formed a quiet alliance of outsiders, sharing knowing glances and gentle smiles, silently agreeing to survive the afternoon without becoming targets. But as the drinks flowed, the energy in the group shifted. Jason and his friends became louder, emboldened by alcohol. Their conversation turned toward memories from high school, stories about pranks and humiliations they had inflicted on others. Or me. Then, inevitably, Jason turned his attention to me. "Hey, remember when we told Audrey the neighbor's dog had rabies?" he shouted. Laughter erupted from the group. My face flushed, a mix of shame and anger bubbling up. I was 8 years old, terrified for a week, my imagination fueled by their lies. The nightmares had felt endless. Tyler joined in. "Or when we swapped her shampoo with hair remover," he cackled, relishing the memory. "That incident at 14 had forced me to wear hats to school for weeks. My parents had dismissed it, telling me to stop overreacting. The humiliation was resurfacing now, just as vivid as it had been years ago. I realized I'd had enough. I grabbed my purse, determined to leave. No birthday obligation, no sense of family duty, was worth reliving these old traumas. But as I turned, Jason stepped in front of me. "Leaving already? The party's just starting," he slurred, the result of one too many drinks. His stance was unsteady but imposing. Drunk Jason was unpredictable, his charm always masking a streak of danger. "I've got a long drive," I said, attempting to sidestep him. "Come on, sis. Loosen up. Have a drink. For old time's sake," he urged, his voice falsely gentle. I knew the pattern too well. Fake friendliness meant to lull me into vulnerability before public humiliation. I shook my head. "No thanks, Jason. I'm out." His face hardened, the charm evaporating. Same old uptight Audrey. Never changes. I exhaled, preparing to cross the deck and make my exit. But the pool deck itself, slick from an earlier cleaning, betrayed me. As I stepped onto the wood, my foot slipped slightly, throwing me off balance. I flailed instinctively, trying to recover, but the surface didn't forgive mistakes. My mind raced in those few seconds. Shock, disbelief, and a visceral fear I couldn't quite articulate. The faces around me, the crowd, Jason's crew, even my parents, blurred in a haze of sound and movement. And then everything went black. I landed hard, the impact reverberating through my body. The world spun. Colors shifted, shapes blurred. A scream left my throat. I realized later that it had been my own. My head throbbed, my back ached, but the most terrifying part was the numbness below my waist. I could feel nothing. The cold realization hit me like a wave. Something was terribly, irreversibly wrong. The celebration continued around me, the laughter now sounding distant, surreal. Time itself seemed suspended. I lay on the ground, staring at the sky, my heart racing. Everything I had known about safety, about family, about my life, seemed to fracture in that moment. "Help!" I gasped, my voice weak, barely reaching my own ears. The fall stole my breath, leaving me fighting for even the shallowest inhale. Panic clawed at me as I tried to take control, but my body refused to cooperate. "I can't feel my legs. Please help me," I whispered, the words trembling on my lips. Jason's face appeared above me, a twisted grin lighting it up. To my horror, he found amusement in my terror. "Nice flop, sis. Always so dramatic," he sneered, turning to his friends. "She's such a theater kid." I tried to sit up, to push myself upright, anything, But my body betrayed me. My arms worked, moving with effort, but my legs were gone. Nothing. No feeling. No control. Just a terrifying emptiness where my lower body should have been. I'm serious, I said, panic sharpening my voice. Something's wrong. I can't move my legs. I hit my back on the concrete. Jason rolled his eyes, clearly assuming this was another act for attention. Get up, Audrey. You're embarrassing yourself. I can't. Tears streamed down my face, hot and unrelenting, blending pain with fear. Please call an ambulance. I'm really hurt. A small crowd had gathered, curiosity and unease spreading across their faces. They looked to Jason, expecting him to manage the situation, assuming this was just family drama played out for their entertainment. Dad finally appeared, pushing through the onlookers with a face tight with irritation. Audrey, what's this? Why are you on the ground? Dad, I sobbed, trying to keep my voice from cracking completely. I slipped and hit the pool's edge. I can't feel my legs. I need a hospital. I expected concern, a flinch of worry, a quick response. Dad, he scoffed. The deck's fine, Audrey. Professionals built it. Walk it off. Stop acting like a baby. You're ruining Jason's party. The words hit harder than the concrete ever could. Even lying helpless on the ground, my suffering didn't matter. Their dismissal stung more than any physical pain. Douglas, maybe we should help her, Mom interjected, appearing beside him. But her worry wasn't about me, it was about the guests watching. I can't get up, I repeated, desperation thick in my voice. Please, Mom, Dad, I'm begging. Something's wrong. Mom knelt beside me, her expression tight, not with fear but irritation. Audrey, enough. You've always been jealous of Jason, but this is too much. You're wrecking his birthday. I couldn't believe it. The pain in my back surged in waves, stealing my focus. My head throbbed, a persistent drumbeat of agony, and nausea curled in my stomach like a storm. I'm gonna be sick, I groaned, turning my head. She's probably drunk, Jason muttered to someone. Classic Audrey, can't handle her booze. I hadn't touched a drop of alcohol. Truth had no place in their narrative about me. My reality, my fear, my pain, ignored again. The sun burned my face, adding to the nausea. Fingers tingled, a faint warning, shock or internal injury. Please, I whispered, nearly too weak to speak. I need help. Dad strolled back to the grill, brushing me off. Mom scurried to explain me away to guests, claiming I was prone to episodes. Their actions made it painfully clear. I was a problem, not a priority. Jason, satisfied, returned to his stories about his new jet ski, his friends' laughter masking the cruelty I was trapped in. Alone on the ground, I felt the sting of betrayal from the people who were supposed to protect me. Then a new voice cut through the chaos. Calm, authoritative, professional. I'm a nurse. Let me through. The crowd parted as she knelt beside me, her eyes warm and steady, focused entirely on me. I'm Rachel, an ER nurse at Massachusetts General. What's your name? Audrey, I managed, shivering despite the summer heat. I explained the fall, the hard impact on the concrete edge, the complete lack of feeling in my legs. Rachel stayed calm, though worry flickered across her eyes. Stay still, Audrey. Can you feel this? She pressed gently on my legs. Nothing. Wiggle your toes. Still nothing. I'm calling an ambulance, she said, pulling out her phone. Mom immediately protested. She doesn't need that. She just needs to get up. Rachel stared her down, unwavering. Ma'am, your daughter may have a spinal cord injury. Moving her could cause permanent damage. She needs professional help immediately. Mom's face showed a flicker of concern. Spinal injury? That's impossible. She just slipped. Rachel's voice was firm. Falls often cause spinal injuries. She hit the concrete hard. We cannot risk moving her. While speaking to 911, giving precise details about the injury and location, Rachel maintained her composure. Dad hovered nearby, uneasy. What's this about an ambulance? He asked, looking between Rachel and me, still trying to frame the situation as a misunderstanding rather than reality. Rachel, still on the phone, held up her hand to stop him. After hanging up, she turned to him directly. Sir, your daughter may have a serious spinal injury. Paramedics will arrive in 10 minutes. Do not move her. His face paled. Slowly, the gravity of the situation began to register. How'd this happen? he asked, instinctively searching for someone to blame. Through the haze of pain, I struggled to speak. The deck, it was slippery. Like oil or something. Dad's eyes narrowed, a mix of disbelief and defensiveness. Nonsense. I had it sealed yesterday. It's not slippery. Rachel's expression didn't change. Sir, the concrete edge was hard. Your daughter's legs aren't responding. This is real. She could be paralyzed. Time dragged, each second stretching endlessly. I felt the summer heat pressing against me, the laughter of oblivious guests fading into a muffled blur. My chest heaved as I fought for breath, the fear coiling tight in my stomach. I wanted someone, anyone, to see me as a person in danger, not a prop in their stories. But the truth was clear. My family had failed me again, and this time the consequences were irrevocable. Finally, sirens pierced the suburban air. Relief and dread collided in my chest. Rachel's hand stayed steady on me, guiding me, ensuring I didn't make a move that could worsen the injury. Paramedics arrived quickly, their presence commanding respect and attention. They assessed me, confirming Rachel's concerns, and carefully prepared me for transport. Mom and Dad hovered at the edges, forced to acknowledge the reality, their earlier dismissal swallowed by the authority of professionals. Jason lingered behind, silent now, the amusement gone from his face, replaced by something I couldn't quite read. Embarrassment? Fear? I didn't care. He had caused this, and I was leaving him with the weight of it. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I caught a glimpse of Rachel's reassuring smile. She whispered, "You're safe now, Audrey. Help is here." For the first time that afternoon, I believed it. The ambulance doors closed, the wailing siren announcing my flight to the hospital, and in that moment the world shifted irreversibly. My life had changed forever, and nothing, not Jason, not my parents, not even the past, could undo it. Rachel, sharp as ever, crouched by the deck where I had fallen, her gloved fingers brushing over the slick wood. "This isn't water," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the stunned silence of the backyard. "It's some kind of oil." All eyes turned toward Jason, who had wandered back out of curiosity. His flushed, inebriated face drained of color instantly. "It was a joke," he mumbled, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Just a prank. I put Dad's deck oil on some boards. Thought she'd slip into the pool, not?" His voice trailed off as the gravity of his actions finally hit him. Silence fell, thick and suffocating, hanging over the backyard like a storm cloud. Lying there, unable to move, I felt a bitter clarity as I watched my family. The truth of who they were was exposed in their faces. Jason's cruel smirk, Dad's denial, Mom's habitual shielding of Jason. But this time there was no easy dismissal. The evidence of Jason's recklessness couldn't be ignored. The wail of sirens sliced through the thick summer air, growing louder with each passing second. Rachel stayed by my side, gently keeping bystanders at a distance. "Stay calm," she said softly, her hands steady on my arms. "Help is almost here. Breathe." I tried, but panic clawed at me, twisting with the numb terror in my legs. Each breath was a mixture of pain and anxiety, my back and head screaming with every inhale, my stomach turning with nausea. Time seemed to stretch, each second a battle against the fear of what might happen if help didn't arrive quickly. Some guests drifted away, quietly slipping off to avoid the scene, while others lingered, their unease palpable. Mom hovered nervously, fidgeting with her hair and adjusting her clothes, her earlier dismissive attitude replaced by uncertain anxiety. "Is this really necessary?" she asked Rachel, her voice tight. "Can't we just take her to urgent care?" Rachel's tone was firm, unyielding. "No. She needs proper transport. Moving her incorrectly could make a spinal injury worse. She must be handled by trained professionals." Dad had gone to help guide the paramedics into the backyard, still struggling to reconcile what had happened. Jason stood frozen, the reality of his prank settling over him like a weight he hadn't anticipated. The paramedics arrived quickly, 2 women and a man, pushing a stretcher through the gate with professional efficiency. Rachel quickly briefed them on my condition and the fall. Sarah, the lead paramedic, knelt beside me, her expression calm but intensely focused. "Hi, Audrey. We've got you. Where's the pain worst?" "My lower back," I managed, my voice shaky, "and my head, but I can't feel below my waist." Sarah nodded, her hands steady. "We'll put a cervical collar on to stabilize your neck, then roll you onto a backboard. Don't try to move, okay? Stay still." As they worked, Sarah asked Rachel for details about the deck. Rachel explained what she had found: the slick oil coating the wood, the clear evidence of tampering. Sarah's eyes sharpened. On purpose? She asked, turning toward Jason. Rachel nodded. Her brother admitted to putting deck oil there as a prank to make her slip. Sarah glanced at Jason, her voice controlled but firm. Sir, is that true? Did you create a slipping hazard that caused this? Jason squirmed, shifting uneasily. It was a joke. I didn't think she'd get hurt like this. Sarah's face hardened, her authority clear. She turned to her colleague. Mike, check the deck and document it. Mike immediately began taking photos and collecting a sample of the oil, his hands methodical as the reality of the situation unfolded. Meanwhile, Sarah and the other paramedics focused on securing me safely. They slid a cervical collar around my neck, then carefully prepared to roll me onto the backboard. On my count, Sarah said. 1, 2, 3. The movement sent a surge of pain ripping through me. I cried out, unable to contain the anguish. Sarah spoke gently, her words soft and grounding. I know it hurts, Audrey. We'll give you pain medication once you're secured. Strapped to the backboard and moved onto the stretcher, monitors were hooked up to track my vital signs. Sarah's frown deepened as she studied the screen. Your blood pressure is low and your heart rate is high. We need to get you to the hospital immediately. Mom finally seemed to grasp the seriousness, her voice small. Will she be okay? Sarah's honesty was sharp but necessary. She has signs of a serious spinal injury. The sooner we get her to a trauma center, the better. Mike returned with the evidence from the deck, showing Sarah the photographs and the oil sample. Her face grew grim. Given the evidence and the situation, I'm calling for the police. Police. Dad sputtered, arriving back from the front yard. This was just an accident. Sarah's gaze didn't waver. Sir, creating a hazard that causes serious injury isn't an accident. And delaying proper help for someone reporting numbness is a medical emergency. Dad's face reddened, defensive and flustered. You can't come into my home and accuse us like that. Dad, I whispered weakly through the oxygen mask, just let them help me. For once he went quiet. The paramedics wheeled me carefully through the house, past stunned and uneasy guests. I caught glimpses of Mom hugging herself, lost and unsure, and Jason frozen, watching the weight of his actions finally unfold. The ambulance doors closed, lights flashing, and a police cruiser arrived behind us, silent but unmistakable in its presence. Despite the pain, despite the terror, a strange sense of relief washed over me. Finally, someone was taking my suffering seriously. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights and sirens, but Rachel and Sarah kept me informed, calm and safe. My pain meds started to take effect, dulling the sharp edges of agony and allowing me to breathe more evenly. Hours later, I woke to the steady beeping of monitors, the antiseptic smell of a hospital room, and the cold weight of reality settling over me. For a fleeting moment, I was lost, unsure of where I was or how it had all happened. Then it all rushed back. The fall, the slick deck, the numb terror in my legs, and the police at my parents' house. A nurse approached my bed, her expression kind but professional, ready to guide me through what was next. I realized then that my life had shifted irrevocably. The family I thought I knew, the people who had shaped so much of my world, had revealed a cruel truth. Neglect, denial, and cruelty had consequences far beyond what I could have imagined. For the first time that day, I felt the fragile, almost unbelievable certainty that I was finally in the hands of people who would see me as I truly was. A person in danger, deserving of care, attention, and protection. Hey Audrey, welcome back. I'm Carlos, your nurse. You're at Massachusetts General. Do you remember what happened? I fell. I croaked, my throat raw from the breathing tube they'd removed. At my brother's party. I couldn't feel my legs. Carlos nodded thoughtfully, jotting notes in my chart. You've been in and out for about 12 hours. The doctor will be here soon to talk. Want some water? I nodded gratefully. He helped me sip through a straw, but even that small motion sent sharp electric pain through my back. I winced, clutching the sheets. What's wrong with me? I asked, my voice trembling. Can I still not move my legs? Carlos's eyes were kind, steady, and patient. The doctor will explain everything. She's almost here. Try to stay calm, okay? Just then, the door opened and a woman in a crisp white coat stepped in. Her hair was silver-streaked and pulled into a neat bun. Morning, Audrey. I'm Dr. Martinez, your neurosurgeon. How are you feeling? Scared, I admitted honestly. And in pain. What happened? Why can't I feel my legs? Dr. Martinez pulled a chair close to my bed, her presence calm and grounding. You sustained an incomplete spinal cord injury at T12L1 in your lower back. The fall fractured 2 vertebrae, compressing your spinal cord. She turned the tablet in her hands toward me, swiping through MRI images, pointing out the fractures and the areas of compression. We performed emergency surgery to remove bone fragments and relieve pressure. We also stabilized your spine using rods and screws. My chest tightened. Will I walk again? I asked, the words catching in my throat, heavy with dread. Dr. Martinez didn't flinch or sugarcoat. Incomplete injuries give hope, Audrey. Your spinal cord wasn't fully severed, which is good news. She explained that recovery would take weeks, months, and a lot of physical therapy. Some patients regain significant movement, others less. It depends on your healing, dedication to rehab, and how your body responds over time, she said carefully. So, I could be paralyzed forever? The words sounded foreign in my own ears, impossible yet terrifyingly real. Not forever, she said cautiously. Right now you have paraplegia, which affects your lower body. With therapy, many patients regain some function, but long-term mobility issues are a possibility. We'll do everything we can to maximize your recovery. The truth hit me like a tidal wave. I went to Jason's party as a healthy 28-year-old, full of life. Now, because of a cruel prank, and the refusal of the people who were supposed to protect me, I faced a life-altering disability. There's more, Dr. Martinez continued, her tone shifting. Your injury's circumstances triggered an investigation. The police want to speak with you when you feel ready. I closed my eyes, trying to process it all. Jason, he put oil on the deck. He admitted it was a prank to make me slip. Dr. Martinez nodded, her expression grave. That matches what the paramedics and witnesses reported. There's also concern about the delay in getting proper help after you said you couldn't feel your legs. My parents didn't believe me, I said, the betrayal cutting deep. They told me to walk it off. They said I was ruining Jason's party. Dr. Martinez's eyes darkened slightly. For suspected spinal injuries, immediate care is critical. Delays can worsen outcomes. I felt the weight of it all settle in my chest. Are you saying if they'd called for help sooner, I might not be paralyzed? We can't know for sure, she said gently. But in spinal injuries, every minute counts. Quicker treatment generally improves outcomes. Tears streamed down my cheeks, the physical pain mingling with emotional anguish. The injury was devastating enough, but knowing that my family's dismissal may have made it worse was a betrayal deeper than I could have imagined. Dr. Martinez gave me a moment to process the information, then asked softly, "Are you ready to talk to the police, or do you need rest first?" "I'll talk," I said, my voice steady despite the fear and exhaustion. "I want them to know exactly what happened." She nodded and stepped out to fetch the officers, leaving Carlos at my side. He adjusted my bed gently, handed me tissues, and offered small reassurances, grounding me amidst the chaos of my thoughts. 2 women officers arrived shortly after, Detective Sullivan and Officer Chin. Their presence was calm, professional, and immediately reassuring. They introduced themselves and explained that they were investigating the circumstances surrounding my injury. "This is tough," Sullivan said, her voice steady but compassionate. "But we need to hear your story about yesterday." I took a deep breath and began recounting everything step by step. Arriving at the party, Jason's fake friendliness, my attempts to leave, the slick deck, the fall, and my parents' initial reaction. Each word carried the weight of shock, fear, and long-standing betrayal. "So, after you fell and said you couldn't feel your legs, no one called for help immediately?" Sullivan asked carefully. "Not until Rachel, a nurse at the party, intervened," I said. "It was at least 15 or 20 minutes later. Dad told me to walk it off. Mom said I was ruining Jason's birthday." Chin looked up from her notes. "And your brother admitted to putting oil on the deck?" "Yeah," I confirmed, the memory vivid. "He said it was a prank. He thought I'd slip into the pool, not hit the concrete." The officers exchanged a meaningful glance. "We've also gathered statements from witnesses, including Rachel and the paramedics," Sullivan added. "And we documented the oil on the deck." I felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. Finally, someone was taking my story seriously, validating my experience in a way my family never had. The weight of isolation and dismissal I'd carried for years began to lift slightly, replaced by a fragile sense of justice taking its first steps. Sullivan leaned in gently. "We're here to make sure your voice is heard and that this matter is investigated thoroughly. We may have further questions, but for now your focus should be on recovery." Carlos placed a reassuring hand on mine. "You're safe here, Audrey. You've got professionals watching out for you, medical, legal, and support staff. You're not alone." I nodded, taking in the faces around me. Doctors, nurses, and now officers who believed me. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sliver of hope amidst the pain. A hope that the nightmare of betrayal, cruelty, and neglect might eventually lead to accountability, and that my path forward might not be entirely defined by my injury. Detective Sullivan paused, then dropped a bombshell. "Last night, we took your brother Jason into custody for reckless endangerment causing serious harm. Your parents, Douglas and Eleanor, are under investigation for negligence and failing to get you medical help." I froze, the words echoing in my mind. My family's cruelty had always been a shadow over my life, but criminal charges? That was a level I never anticipated. My throat tightened and for a moment I could barely speak. Could they go to jail? I whispered, voice trembling. Sullivan's nod was slow and steady. "That's up to the district attorney and the courts. These are serious charges, especially considering your injuries." The room felt heavy, suffused with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and an unexpected sense of justice. They asked a few more questions, thanked me for my cooperation, and left, promising updates as the case progressed. Alone, I lay in the hospital bed, grappling with the stark reality of my new life. My body was broken, my mobility compromised, and my family, who I had always turned to, faced criminal scrutiny. No calls came from my parents. Not a single word from Jason. Were they barred from contacting me? Or was this their way of avoiding responsibility as always? The question lingered, unanswered, adding another layer to the complicated feelings swirling in my mind. That evening, Marcus, a hospital social worker, stopped by. Tall, kind-eyed, and calm, he introduced himself as someone who would help plan my care. "Your recovery will take time," he said gently, sitting in the chair next to my bed. "After acute care, you'll likely spend weeks in inpatient rehab. Once you're ready, outpatient therapy will help you transition back to daily life." Panic bubbled up. "I live alone," I said, my voice cracking. "My apartment has stairs. I teach elementary school. I'm on my feet all day." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "We'll tackle those challenges together. There are resources for home modifications, job support, and even disability benefits. It's overwhelming, I know, but you won't face it alone." Overwhelming. That word barely covered it. In just 24 hours, my life had flipped upside down. My body, home, career, and family ties had all been shattered. I was still processing the collision of physical pain and emotional betrayal. That night, lying alone in my hospital room, I cried. Not just for my injury, but for the life I had known and the one I was about to navigate. Yet, deep in the core of my being, a spark of resilience flickered. I had survived years of emotional abuse from my family. I had endured humiliation, dismissal, and subtle cruelty. I would survive this too, and finally, my family would face the consequences of their actions. The next 2 weeks blurred together, a haze of medical procedures, pain management, and the earliest steps of rehabilitation. I stayed in the hospital for 14 days, each day revealing more about the extent of my injury. Dr. Martinez visited daily, her presence both firm and comforting. "Your surgery stabilized your spine and relieved pressure on the spinal cord," she explained one morning, "but the damage is significant. Healing will take time if it happens fully." She classified my injury as Asia C, meaning I had some motor function below the injury, but it was weak and sensation was partially present. Each small tingle or flicker of feeling in my thighs or lower legs felt miraculous, a fragile thread of hope that things could improve. But I still could not flex my hips fully or move my knees, leaving me dependent on others for basic tasks. Physical therapy began in small increments. A therapist guided me through simple exercises while remaining acutely aware of my fragile spine. Every movement sent sharp reminders through my body, pain, tingling, and the frustrating knowledge that recovery would be neither quick nor easy. The legal aspect of my reality weighed heavily as well. 10 days after my injury, Laura Jensen, an assistant district attorney, visited me in the hospital. "The police finished their investigation," she said, her voice steady but sympathetic. "We've charged your brother and parents. Jason faced a felony for reckless endangerment, potentially punishable by up to 10 years in prison. My parents faced negligence charges with maximum penalties of 5 years if convicted." The weight of these facts pressed down on me. Part of me felt vindicated. Justice was finally being acknowledged. Another part felt sorrow. These were my parents, flawed and cruel though they were, and now their freedom hung in the balance. Laura outlined my options further. I could pursue a civil lawsuit for damages, separate from the criminal case. "Spinal cord injuries can cost millions over time," she said. "Medical bills, lost wages, home modifications, equipment, and long-term care all add up. Filing a civil suit is a way to secure your independence and safety." The financial implications hit hard. My career as a teacher had been my identity. Now, my mobility and independence were in question, and the cost of recovery and adjustments loomed like an unscalable mountain. Part of me wanted to sever all ties with my family, focus on healing, and move forward. But the reality remained. My family's actions had left me with long-term financial burdens I could not ignore. Laura connected me with Michael Greenberg, a personal injury attorney specializing in spinal cord injury cases. He visited the next day, reviewing medical records, witness statements, and the police reports. "Your case is solid," he said, pointing to Jason's admission and the documented evidence. "We can pursue damages for your injury. Insurance might cover some costs, but for full recovery and independence, we'd look at their personal assets as well." Suing my parents felt morally uncomfortable, even wrong. But Michael made the point clear. "This isn't about revenge, Audrey. It's about ensuring you have the resources you need for your medical care, independence, and future." He was right. My new reality demanded tough decisions. The lawsuit was both vital and painful, a necessary step to protect myself from the consequences of their actions and secure the means to rebuild my life. My physical recovery progressed as well. After 2 weeks in acute care, I transitioned to a specialized spinal cord injury rehabilitation center. The facility was modern and bright, staffed with therapists, nurses, and psychologists trained to help patients adjust to life after a spinal cord injury. The environment was challenging but hopeful. I met others with varying injuries, some further along in recovery, others just starting. Their stories inspired me and showed the possibilities that lay ahead. Therapy sessions were grueling, exhausting, and occasionally painful, but each session pushed me closer to reclaiming some independence. I learned to navigate life in a wheelchair, relearned basic movements, and started to adapt my home and routines in my mind. Simple things like reaching for objects or transferring to a bed or chair became victories. Each day was a mix of frustration, small achievements, and emotional processing. Emotionally, the separation from my family remained raw. My parents and brother had been a toxic presence my entire life, but now their actions had real consequences that rippled into every corner of my existence. Despite the betrayal, I reminded myself daily. Their legal troubles and potential penalties were a direct result of choices I never made but suffered from. I journaled each day, documenting progress, fears, and milestones. The writing became a lifeline, a place to process anger, sorrow, and the cautious sparks of hope. Slowly, the hospital room transformed from a place of helplessness to one of possibility, a place where I could begin rebuilding not just my body but my sense of self. My physical therapist, David, was a mix of bright optimism and straight talk. "We're aiming to boost any function you regain," he said at our first session, "but just as key is mastering independence with what you've got now." Those words set the tone. Life at the rehab center quickly settled into a grueling yet necessary routine. Mornings meant 2 hours of physical therapy, pushing muscles that still responded to the faintest nerve signals. I learned to shift from bed to wheelchair and back, to use my upper body for tasks I had never thought about before. Afternoons were reserved for occupational therapy. There, I practiced everyday movements from a seated position, dressing myself, preparing simple meals, even using adaptive tools to open jars or reach high cabinets. Tasks I had once taken for granted became both a challenge and a victory. Group sessions introduced me to others with spinal cord injuries. Some were years past the acute stage, returning for refresher courses in strength and mobility. Others, like me, were newly injured, navigating the sudden flip of life that a spinal cord injury brings. Their stories resonated with mine. Loss, frustration, and small victories shared in equal measure. One of the first friends I made was Tara, injured in a car crash 2 years ago. She used braces and crutches for short walks but relied on a wheelchair for daily mobility. Over dinner one evening, she spoke with the wisdom of someone who had survived the early chaos. "It gets easier," she said. "Not always the physical part, though that improves. I mean emotionally. Right now your injury defines you. Eventually it's just part of you." Her words planted a seed of hope in me. Some days I stood between parallel bars, feeling new tingles in my feet, small signs that my nerves were still trying to communicate. Other days setbacks loomed. Infections stalled therapy, or fatigue and despair made progress feel impossible. Throughout this period my family remained silent. My attorney explained that their lawyers had barred contact due to ongoing legal cases. A part of me felt relieved to be free from their scrutiny and judgment. Another part, however, grappled with abandonment, feeling the familiar sting of being left alone when I needed support most. Thankfully, my friends from school filled the gap. They visited, brought homemade meals, and organized fundraisers to cover costs that insurance didn't. Their loyalty reminded me that family isn't always defined by blood. 3 months after my injury, the criminal cases moved forward. Jason took a plea deal. Felony reckless endangerment resulting in 5 years. 2 in prison, 3 on probation. My parents also accepted plea deals. 2 years probation, 400 hours of community service each, and mandatory counseling. Justice in some form had finally arrived. The civil case dragged on longer. Depositions forced my family to admit under oath the details of their neglect and Jason's prank. Every admission was painful, a reminder of the years of cruelty I had endured. 6 months after filing, the case finally settled. My parents' insurance paid $1 million and they sold their house, contributing $2 million to a trust specifically for my care. The settlement covered medical bills, apartment modifications, and provided a financial buffer as I planned my future. But no amount of money could erase the emotional loss, the betrayal of those I had once trusted most. By 8 months post-injury, my progress surprised even my therapists. With braces and a walker, I could take slow, deliberate steps. Not true walking, but far beyond what many in my condition achieve at this stage. I transitioned from inpatient rehab to outpatient therapy 3 times a week. My apartment was modified with ramps, wider doorways, and an accessible bathroom. A part-time caregiver assisted with tasks I couldn't manage alone. Work needed adjustments too. Classroom teaching wasn't feasible anymore, but my school district offered me a curriculum specialist role, mostly remote, allowing me to continue contributing to education while accommodating my new needs. Healing wasn't only physical. Claire, my therapist specializing in trauma, helped me navigate the emotional fallout from my family's lifelong neglect. "Your injury isn't just physical," she said gently. "It's the result of years of emotional abuse and invalidation." She helped me unpack the golden child scapegoat dynamics with Jason, and my parents' obsession with appearances over well-being. "Your family failed you," Claire said. "Their job was to protect you. Instead, they hurt you and denied it." Admitting this hurt deeply but also freed me. The injury, though devastating, had broken me free from their toxic influence. "Will you reconcile with them?" Claire asked one day. I paused. "I don't know. Part of me says no way. Part wonders if these consequences might finally make them face reality." "Your healing doesn't depend on them or their change," Claire reminded me. "It's for you." And so, I started focusing on healing body and soul. A year after my injury, a letter arrived from Jason in prison. It sat unopened for 3 days as I prepared myself to face it. When I finally read it, it was long and handwritten. A sincere apology, the first real one I'd ever received from him. He wrote about his prison therapy, facing the consequences of his actions and reflecting on the harm he caused. He made no excuses, asked for nothing, and said simply, "I understand if you never want to hear from me. I'm sorry for the pain I caused, not just that day but always. You deserved better." It felt genuine, though I wasn't ready to reconnect. Still, his acknowledgement gave me a small measure of closure. My parents never reached out. I heard they moved to Florida, starting over in a smaller house with whatever assets they retained post-settlement. I built a new life, different but meaningful. Friends from the rehab center became my chosen family, and the disability advocacy community provided purpose, belonging, and connection. I discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed, not just to survive but to grow through trauma. 2 years after that awful party, my life was unrecognizable from the one I had left behind. I live in a ground-floor accessible apartment now, drive with hand controls and work mostly from home. I visit schools monthly to train teachers on curriculum, ensuring my professional life continues despite my limitations. My doctors call my physical progress remarkable. I've gained strength, independence, and confidence. I still rely on a wheelchair for longer distances and braces for support, but each day I reclaim more of my life. More importantly, I've reclaimed my sense of self. The cruelty of my past no longer defines me. I've learned that family isn't always those who share your blood. It's the people who lift you when you're down, who believe in you when others don't. I survived their betrayal, my fall, and the long road of recovery. And I grew stronger in ways I never imagined, proving to myself that even the most unexpected tragedies can become a foundation for resilience, independence, and a meaningful, fulfilling life. With braces and crutches, I can walk short distances, but my wheelchair remains my main way to get around. About 60% of my lower body has sensation now, though it's inconsistent. Sometimes pins and needles, sometimes oversensitive, never quite normal. Some days I move with ease, almost forgetting my limits. Other days, pain, spasms, or infections like UTIs hit hard, reminding me how drastically my life has changed. I've had to accept that my body isn't the same and it may never be. But the real healing isn't just physical. It's the shift from being a victim to becoming a survivor, from letting others' actions define me to writing my own story. 6 months ago, I joined a spinal cord injury advocacy group, mentoring new patients. Twice a week, I return to the rehab center where I relearned life's basics, sitting with people who are lost in grief and fear, just like I was 2 years ago. They don't know if life can be good again, I tell them, echoing Tara's words from my early days in rehab. It doesn't get easier, but you get stronger. You find new ways to care about what matters. Through this work, I met Thomas, a physical therapist who specializes in neurological injuries. At first, our connection was purely professional. He pushed me in therapy, celebrated small wins, and challenged me to stretch my limits. Slowly, our conversations drifted beyond exercises, and over time, friendship blossomed. Eventually, a cautious romance formed. Thomas sees me fully, not just my disability but all of me. With him, I'm learning what real love feels like, built on respect, understanding, and care. For the first time, I feel truly seen, not as broken, not as a project, but as a whole person. My family's story is still messy. Jason got out of prison 4 months ago, serving 2 years of his sentence. He wrote me asking to meet when I was ready. I haven't decided if that's part of my healing. The thought of seeing him brings a swirl of emotions: resentment, cautious curiosity, and the faintest spark of forgiveness that I'm not yet sure is ready to surface. My parents live in Florida now, separate from me. I hear through relatives that they've spun a tale of being supportive parents through my tragic accident. Their version protects their image as always. But their story no longer controls me. My truth doesn't need their approval to be real. That realization has been the biggest lesson of all. Validation comes from within. For someone who spent years being taught to doubt their own pain, this is life-changing. I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you're vulnerable, who stays when it's hard, who responds to your pain with compassion. My chosen family has grown over these years. There's Sarah, the paramedic who got me help that day. Rachel, the nurse who refused to let anyone dismiss my cries. David, my therapist who pushed me to regain function. Claire, who guided me through trauma and helped me rebuild my self-worth. And now Thomas, who loves me, scars and all. They've shown me what true support feels like: being believed, valued, and accepted for who I am. Last month, I completed my master's degree in educational psychology, focusing on trauma-informed teaching. Next fall, I'll start as a school district consultant, training teachers to recognize and support students dealing with trauma, including family dysfunction. It's a way to honor my journey, turning my pain into purpose. Healing, I've learned, isn't erasing wounds. It's making them mean something bigger. My paralysis and family history are part of my story, but they don't define me. When I laugh with Thomas or spend evenings with friends, I feel happy, not despite my past but because my resilience is woven into every moment of joy. Late at night, pain still wakes me. I wrestle with anger and grief for what I've lost. My old abilities, the toxic family ties, and a sense of safety I may never fully regain. But even then, I'm not alone. I've learned to reach out, to be vulnerable with those I trust, to accept help without shame, and to own my limits without letting them define me. Trauma teaches an unexpected wisdom. Our wounds shape us, but they don't have to control us. Even betrayals can spark transformation. Being broken showed me my strength, patience, and capacity for self-compassion. I don't know what's next. My doctors say I might see small improvements for up to 5 years. I may walk better someday, or I may not. Either way, I will build a life that fits my reality while pushing the limits of what's possible. I'm no longer the woman who walked into that party 2 years ago, seeking approval from people who could not see me. I am new, shaped by trauma, strengthened in my broken places, more real, more compassionate, and more aware of both my vulnerability and my power. That is the unexpected gift of this ordeal. Discovering self-worth worth fighting for, learning to believe in myself, and even learning to love myself. If you're watching and your pain has been dismissed by those who should have believed you, know this. You deserve better. Your experiences are real. Your suffering matters. There are people who will see you if you're brave enough to reach past those who won't. Have you had your pain ignored by someone who should have believed you? How did you find the strength to trust yourself again? Share your story in the comments. It might be exactly what someone else needs today. Healing isn't a straight line. It's full of setbacks, breakthroughs, and moments of clarity. But it's always possible. And even when you feel broken, there is a way forward. A life worth building. A life full of love, purpose, and resilience. Thank you for witnessing my journey. I hope it reminds you, no matter the obstacles, you can reclaim your story, your body, and your life.